Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Sussex Champions, the podcast where we cut through royal PR fluff, side-eye palace spin, and decode what the British monarchy is really saying and not saying. If you're new here, this channel exists for one reason: to question the narratives we're spoon-fed by palace insiders, royal correspondents, and the Friends of Camilla industrial complex. We're not here for fairy tales. We're here for patterns, power, and the PR games behind the palace gates. Today's episode is about a royal you barely hear from, rarely see, and probably forget exists until he pops up in an awkward news clip. Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh. Yes, that Edward. The monarchy's very own ghost, working royal. Let's start with the basics. Prince Edward is technically a working royal, but you'd be forgiven for thinking he's on a permanent tea break. He doesn't trend. He doesn't headline. He doesn't leak briefings to friendly reporters about how he's bravely stepping into his destiny as a global statesman. In fact, most people couldn't tell you where he travels, what causes he champions, or even what his voice sounds like anymore. He's the royal equivalent of background music in a hotel lobby, present but never noticed. So when news breaks that Edward has been off doing official crown business in Dubai, it's almost shocking. Wait, Edward has a job? And he travels? And CNN is interviewing him? Well, surprise. Prince Edward attended the World Government Summit in Dubai, a pretty major global event involving leaders, policymakers, and international organizations discussing education, innovation, and the future of governance. Now, let's pause. Isn't this exactly the kind of event we're constantly told Prince William is perfectly suited for? The so-called future of the monarchy, the global statesman, the man whose PR team never misses a chance to remind us he's doing serious global work. Yet, it's Edward who's there, not William, not Charles. The quiet spare brother is holding the mic. Already, that tells you something about how unevenly the royal workload is distributed, and how carefully image is curated for some royals, while others are sent out quietly to do the actual work. During the summit, Edward sat down for a Q&A with CNN's Eleni Giokos. And let's be real, no serious journalist was going to let a senior royal sit on that stage without addressing the royal family's most radioactive scandal, Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. So Giokos asked Edward, in essence, how is the royal family coping with the fallout of Andrew's association with Epstein and the abuse of trafficked women and girls? This was not a surprise question. This scandal has been haunting the monarchy for years. There has been plenty of time to prepare a response that is human, clear, honest, and centred on accountability. What did Edward give us instead? A classic royal non-answer. Edward responded by essentially saying, "This probably isn't the audience for that topic. People came here to talk about education and the future. But it's important to remember the victims. There are a lot of victims in all of this." Now, on the surface, royal fans rushed to say, "Look, a royal finally mentioned the victims." But let's not be fooled. This was carefully vague, emotionally empty, politically safe, and strategically meaningless. There was no mention of accountability, cooperation with authorities, justice, or the royal family's own role in sheltering Andrew. It's empathy theatre, a performance of concern without the inconvenience of responsibility. And honestly, it's embarrassing that after years of this scandal dominating global headlines, this is still the best the palace can manage when a royal is put on the spot. Royal commentator Tom Sykes, who's usually not known for hard-hitting criticism, pointed out what many of us were already thinking. Edward's answer was bad. Not just awkward, not just clumsy, but strategically weak. It showed that the royal family still has no coherent, credible way to talk about Andrew and Epstein without retreating into word salad and PR fog. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Was Edward even meant to answer this question seriously? Or was he quietly being used as a test run? This is where it gets interesting. Former BBC royal correspondent Peter Hunt argued that it's time for King Charles to publicly state that Andrew should cooperate with US authorities, and for journalists to start asking Charles and William tougher questions about Andrew during public engagements. And here's the strategic angle the palace might be playing. Edward could very well be the canary in the coal mine. Send out a lower-profile royal. Let him take the Epstein-Andrew hit. Gauge the media reaction. Then decide how much, or how little, the senior royals can get away with saying publicly. If Edward's meaningless answer is accepted with polite nods and soft headlines, the palace learns it can keep dodging accountability. If the reaction is harsh, they'll tighten the PR scripts even more. If you haven't seen the clip of Edward's answer, I strongly recommend watching it, because tone matters. When you see his body language, the discomfort, the awkward deflection, it becomes clear. This wasn't a confident, prepared response from an institution that takes accountability seriously. This was a man trying to dodge a scandal that the monarchy still doesn't know how to confront. It's not just what he said. It's how unready the royal family still looks to face the consequences of their own protection of Prince Andrew. So what does this moment with Prince Edward really tell us? It tells us that the royal family still prioritizes image management over accountability. They've had years to craft a meaningful response to the Epstein scandal. And they still fumble. Even the quiet, invisible royals are now being pulled into damage control. And most importantly, if this is the best the monarchy can do when asked about victims of trafficking and abuse, then the institution hasn't learned nearly enough from the damage it's already suffered. That's it for today's episode of Your Channel Name. If you enjoy sharp royal commentary without the palace-approved sugarcoating, make sure to follow the podcast, subscribe on your favourite platform, and drop a comment telling me. Do you think Prince Edward was used as a PR test case for Charles and William? Or was this just another example of the royal family being completely unprepared to face reality? Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode where we pull back the velvet curtain and take a closer look at what the palace really doesn't want you to notice.